Hi, this is Ela, and I'm going to demonstrate how to apply glazing and underpainting to painting a tree. So one of the nice things about having an underpainting is it means that you're not going to be stuck with a bunch of white spots in between each leaf that you paint or each group of branches. If you want to have a sense of this is a large three-dimensional thing that has many layers, it's helpful to have literally multiple layers. So I'm going to do this picture again. Unfortunately, I don't have a reference photo, but basically it was a giant bushy tree. There wasn't a really clear trunk. There is some branches you could see on the inside. I'm just going to do a larger version of it over here. It's kind of hard to see my pencil drawing, but I do think it's really helpful to do a drawing just so you know where you're going to put your paintbrush, especially when you're first starting out. As you get more and more confident, you can work more fast and loose, but you need to know how to draw, and you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just to have some sort of guide so you know where you're going. So since we're working from light to dark, I have a very, very pale greenish yellow here. So here's what that color looks like. It's good to test it out and have a sense of what you're doing. And I'm just going to color it in. I have a big moppy brush here. It can cover an area very, very quickly. I'm starting here and I'm working my way out. I'm not outlining. I'm not scribbling all over the place. I can dip my brush and make sure I really have plenty to go around. It's a pale wash, so it's easy to mix. It's okay if I go outside the lines, if I don't make it all the way to the pencil mark. This is a big, loose, bushy tree. And if I want to do a sky, I can. I just have to be aware that if I touch the tree with the blue, it's going to bleed. So I like this color. This is a cobalt teal. I'm gonna put a little bit of ultramarine blue just so it's not too greenish. And I can just go in there. And once again, I'm also working very pale with that sky color. If I run out, since it's so pale, I can go in there and just get my wet brush on there, working fast and loose. It helps that this paint hasn't been sitting wet for a long time, so it won't dissolve very quickly. That's good enough. If I want to put some ground down here, I can. I can make it a little bit more greenish. Here we go. Slightly darker underpainting down here. And maybe I'll pull that color up in later. Okay, there's my underpainting. I'm going to let this dry and then I can go in with my next layer. Okay, paper is dry. It is not cold. It's no longer curling. It is dry. I can add the next layer on top. I like to use the right tool for the job. That brush I used for the underpainting is kind of big and wet and juicy. Now I'm going in for the detail. So I'm going to do some of these orangey dots on here. And they're going to look kind of funky at first. People think that their paintings are supposed to look impressive from the very, very beginning, and that is not how it works. You're gonna have to relax and trust the process. There's gonna be some ugly duckling stages. You're not gonna love every stage, right? That doesn't look nearly as good as that, but that's because we're not there yet. We have to just put in some orange dots first. We're putting in some texture. We're making it more interesting. It's not just one shade of yellow. We've got 2 shades. You don't have to do a million, but now once I've put that in, now I can take this brush and I can kind of soften it up. You can see I'm not I'm just kind of dabbing it around randomly. And it's not going to look exactly like the other one, but I'm getting some of that effect. There's areas that are lighter. There's areas that are more concentrated. I kind of like how this was kind of more horizontal and this is more vertical. We're getting some wet into wet technique kind of mixed in with the dry brush. It's turning into something more interesting. I can go back in again. Let's do more of this. I could have more areas where it's more concentrated. I can have areas where there's less. It would be nice if I had a reference photo just so I could base it off of something, but it'll be okay. And I go back in again. Here we go. I could do this with my bigger brush, but I like how the smaller brush, it's like you've got more pockets in between those strokes that I'm putting down, or blobs that I'm putting down. And my brush is really wet. Every time I reach out, I'm dipping it in water, and I'm just putting a bunch more water on there and kind of spreading it around. That's where my hand is going. It's like water, blah, 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 water, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not wiping it or anything. I'm just piling it on. But there's these little pockets in between. And that's where you get those cool effects. I'm working fast trying to catch this before it dries completely. If I wanted to put some more on, I can. Still have this little bit of that yellow, that orangey yellow on the brush here. This is the Daniel Smith basic set that has the warm and cool versions of the 3 primary colors. So those 6 colors down here come in one box from Daniel Smith, and all of these are colors that I picked out individually. So now I get to wait again. I might pick up a little bit of the excess up here. I could use my thirsty brush. This is, I squeeze out the water and I can soak up any really big puddles that I don't want. And now I can dry this with a hairdryer. So now this is the fun part. I can just keep adding more layers to this. And so that, but I have to keep thinking, okay, working from light to dark. So I've got this orangey layer on. If I wanted to, I could even do a little bit more. I like how this looks right here, how that extends out. And if I wanted to, I could take a fan brush. I could just keep adding more of this yellow, and I don't even have to blend it in if I don't want to. But, you know, it's like I've got a little bit on. It looks less awkward if I feel like throwing a little bit more on there, just to cover some of that white a little bit, create some areas of interest. But every time I put a layer on, I'm going to have to let it dry. And I'm being very light, very delicate. I'm paying attention, even though it's random. I'm not just cramming it on there. I'm trying to have a delicate hand. More dry time, and then I'm going to put in these shadows. This is the next layer of darkness. Okay, so now the question is, what color do I want to make the shadows? And here I chose to make them green, just to really make it clear that these are leaves. There are yellow highlights, but there's also some green highlights in there. And shadows tend to be kind of bluish anyway, so blue and yellow make green. So I'm going to go ahead with a bluish shadow, and I have this yellow already mixed here. And it's even a little bit of funky color from other projects that I've done in the past, and that's actually going to work in our favor. So I'm going to throw in a little bit of cobalt blue. It could be any blue you want. And it could, you know, you could go in a completely different direction, but this will help it say tree for me. I often use cobalt or ultramarine blue when I'm painting shadows. And I can even see what does it look like on this yellow swatch that I did earlier. And it's a very muted blue, which I think is good. It's going to say shadow for me. So I'm just going to look at this and think, okay, I'm going to put some loose shadowy areas in here. And I could use a larger brush, but this will be okay. I can have little blobs in there. So these are those deeper parts of the tree, and I can have little yellow areas sticking out like they're leaves. We've got multiple layers. We've got leaves in front. We've got shadows deeper in. And I might have my shadows kind of connect up with the ground underneath too. Kind of a similar color. And I can also get my brush wet if I want to make some softer, paler shadow areas. They don't have to be quite so intense. And I'm embracing any randomness that's going on. It's like this line between not too fussy, but also not so loose that I can't create the illusion. I can think, if the light was coming from the right side, maybe I would put some more shadows here on the left. Or maybe that's high noon and it's more kind of coming from directly above. Looking at the light, thinking about what's going on and what you want to capture. So that's looking pretty cool. I like that. Could add more of this green over here and over here. So there's some of the shadow from that tree. So that's beginning to look like a tree or a big bush. And I can let this dry out again, and I can put in some branches in there just to finish it off. So I like how this is developed, and I think all I need now are these branches that are inside. And so, you don't want to be heavy-handed. You don't need to worry about having the whole branch show up, especially if it's covered up by some of these leaves, some of these yellow areas. It's just in the really shadowy parts where you can see inside of the tree and see those branches. Another thing is to think about what color do you want to make those branches. And often the bark on trees is not bright, intense brown. It's not burnt sienna. It's more of kind of a grayish neutral color. And I can actually just mix sort of a muddy color from a couple of different primaries. So that's kind of a very dark, almost a blackish gray. Make a little bit more. So this is this sort of light red, and I don't think this is a phthalo blue. I think this is a Prussian blue, but it's very similar. And it's in the shadow, so it's going to be dark. So I'm just going to go ahead and just think, where would a branch be? Once again, helpful if I had a reference photo. You can also just kind of play around and just put some branches in there. It might be a little bit thicker towards the bottom, or not, depending. But just giving it a little bit of structure. I think that's it. I mean, if I want to put a little bit in the lighter areas, just keep it really moderate. All right, I think that looks pretty good. I might do some more to this area down here. This is the focus of the picture. I don't have to do a lot anywhere else, but it's nice to have a little bit of texture for the ground. And it doesn't have to really describe anything with any detail, just so it's not quite so flat and boring. I could even extend it up a little bit if I want. But this is the focus. And then these are all just kind of general suggestions around it. So I think that's done. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. I hope you can apply this logic to whatever subject you want to paint. Okay, bye-bye.